Hi, Representative Durst. Your early graduation bill passed the House and the Senate and is headed to the governor's desk for his signature, hopefully. Um, what happens next for the program, and how will you be involved in its development?
Well, there's really two phases now. First is we need to develop some rules, and Representative Thane and I will be working on that process. And we've also um, need to get districts interested in applying for the pilot, and we'll be working with parent networks and other patrons of those school districts to inform their local school districts that it's something they're interested in doing, and encouraging them to participate.
I know it's a brand new, or it should be soon could be a new law. Um, but have you and Representative Thane seen much interest from districts in participating in the program, or have you guys explored that at all?
We've seen some high level interest from different districts, and we've talked to parents that have expressed interest that will be trying to lobby their districts to participate. And so I feel pretty comfortable that and pretty confident that we'll have the participation necessary to be able to fill out the pilot program and be able to have even a competitive process in selecting those districts.
Now, this might be a little bit of a leap of imagination, but the program lasts 6 years. Where do you see Idaho education if the program works in 6 years after the completion of the pilot project?
Well, I suspect that after the first 3 or 4 years, we'll have a pretty good feel about where the project's been going and how successful it's going to be. I think that those last 2 years will be useful in kind of finalizing some data, but I think that in those first 3 or 4 years, we'll see that it's whether or not it works or not. And I believe that it will. And when it does, I think what we'll see is there be a tremendous demand outside of the pilot to be able to participate.
Mm-hmm.
And I see this as really being able to revolutionize how we look at not only funding education, but also how parents and students and administrators and teachers look at educating children themselves. And so I suspect in 3 to 4 years we'll have quite a bit of change, and I think that people will be interested in looking at this model more closely, not just here in Idaho, but throughout the country.
Now, if, say, you or Representative Thane do not get reelected during that time, who will continue to carry on the banner of the project? Is it just a legislative project from now on, or will you two still find a way to play a role in its integration and development?
Well, for me, that's never been about, my being the author of the plan. It's always been about what we can do as legislators to improve public education in the state of Idaho. And so, regardless of where my role is in state government or in government generally speaking, is I'm not worried about that, because I believe that if the program works, that parents will be the ones that are interested in seeing it move forward, and so will teachers and so will administrators. And so once that happens, it becomes self-sufficient and allows itself to be self-perpetuating.
Right. Earlier today, to switch subjects, Governor Otter basically declared the legislative session a success. Do you agree with him?
It's a success compared to the last 3 sessions he's had. Certainly he hasn't ended up fighting a battle that he's lost. He hasn't tried to raise taxes on Idahoans. So I guess if that's his definition of a success, not losing, then I guess, yeah, it's a success. But if you define success by actually accomplishing something, then it's not. He didn't push forward any legislation to improve access to jobs creation or improve the business climate in the state of Idaho. He didn't improve the education system in the state of Idaho. So really, it's a success because he didn't fail, but I'd rather actually have a positive action instead of a lack of a negative action.
All right. Now, one question I've asked everybody that I've talked to today, what, in your opinion, is the worst piece of legislation to come out of this session, if you can name one?
The worst. In terms of legislation, I would say, well, if it weren't legislation, I said the worst bill would be the budget. But in the actual legislation and when we're changing policy,
It can be a budget. It can be
I
whatever
think
you'd like it to
if
be.
you look at it from a budget, I think that the worst thing we've done is cut the division of Medicaid, the amount that we have. And the reason is because it's, from a business model perspective, there's a guaranteed return on investment of 4 to 1. And we've basically left $100+ million on the table from the federal government that was used to provide services, but also provide local and private providers jobs to deploy those services. So we've cut a huge amount of jobs with that action, And I think that's really going to be the one that comes to bite us in the backside in the future.
And now conversely, what is the best piece of legislation or budgetary item that you've seen come out of this session?
Well, that's easy. My bill was the
Yeah.
best. I mean, I really think that, and that's might be a little conceited, but I think that the Mastery Advancement Pilot Project, because of the scope and scale of what we're talking about and its innovative nature, I think that it was one of the very few new ideas that were actually given a chance to breathe and get some life. And so I think that would probably be the biggest thing, the best thing that we've done so far this year.
Okay. Now going back to Matt for just one more second, one last question. Are you surprised that it's a rather innovative project? Are you surprised that something that contains such out-of-the-box thinking passed the legislature without much opposition?
I am a little bit. I think that it's kind of indicative of a couple things. Number one, I think it's indicative of the fact that Idahoans and legislators as well are looking for solutions to problems that are facing our state, particularly in the education field. So I think that it's indicative of that, but I think it's also indicative of just the way in which, if you work together across the aisles, I think that things can get accomplished. My caucus, Representative Thane worked his caucus, and on the Senate side we were able to do the same. If you look, we got bipartisan majorities in both caucuses on both sides of the aisle. So all four caucuses in the state legislature, majorities of them were in support of this plan. And that includes, like I said, all four Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats, House Democrats, and House Republicans. The majority of all four of those caucuses supported this plan.
Mm-hmm.
I think that goes to show that it was able to have the success that it had.
Perfect. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thanks, Destin.